What's good? You are watching Mobius Trip Gaming with another segment of Retro Revisited. Today is different because I've not brought with me just one game, but instead two games. The 1993 releases of Disney's Aladdin on the Super Nintendo and on the Sega Genesis. But these two games are not different ports. They are two entirely different games with two different experiences. In a sense, you could say that these games may be aimed at two different audiences. But before I go into detail about that, go ahead and subscribe and click that bell to stay updated with the latest videos and updates. Disney's Aladdin needs no introduction. We all know it was a huge success and an iconic animated movie with iconic characters, iconic music, based on a story told to French writer Antoine Galland by a Syrian named Hannah Diab about a Chinese story, supposedly. Well, that's not convoluted at all. At this time in gaming history, it was starting to become common for TV shows, animated movies, and full-length feature films to have video game adaptations. So a year later, after the success of the animated film in 1992, two games were developed. The first game we will talk about is the Super Nintendo release, which was developed and published by Capcom. The game was designed by then game designer Shinji Mikami, who, by the way, is the founder of Tango Gameworks, which developed titles The Evil Within 1 and 2, Ghostwire Tokyo, and Hi-Fi Rush. The Super Nintendo release plays very similar to Capcom platformers of that time, and the music is indicative of the sound of Capcom on the Super Nintendo. The majority of the music in this game is exclusive to this game, with the exception of A Whole New World and Friend Like Me. The intro starts similar to the film, with Jafar's experiment using Gazim with the Cave of Wonders. The music definitely is a vibe, and the rumble sound effect at the Cave of Wonders close-up is downright eerie on the headphones. Super Nintendo gameplay is rather simple and can be summarized rather easily. The goal is to get to the end of the level, and within each level are enemies, gemstones, and a golden scarab. Gemstones, if 100 are collected, will grant you a new heart. The scarabs are for a bonus mini-game with a chance at getting extra credits, more lives, or an extra heart. The enemies are rather easy to kill, requiring nothing more than jumping on them. But to be fair, the jump is the strongest weapon you have in this game. You are also able to collect apples as well as throw them at enemies, but they only kill small enemies or flying enemies. Enemies such as the palace guards are only stunned. Also, throwing apples at flying enemies seems rather useless, as you will commonly need to jump on them to propel yourself further up towards a platform. The game follows the story of the film pretty closely, except for a few parts. The first departure is when Genie comes into the picture. Instead of it being that Genie shows off his power in the cave while singing Friend Like Me, instead he pulls Aladdin into the lamp into a wacky, crazy Genie world where his face is on absolutely everything while the tune for Friend Like Me is playing. This level just takes me back to Robin Williams and how he was one of my favorite actors when I was a kid, and he still is. I mean, just listen to the music and look at the crazy visuals. You can't help but think of Robin. Seriously, rest in peace to Robin Williams. The second departure in the story is when they leave the Cave of Wonders, where apparently Abu falls off of the carpet and disappears into the ruins of an ancient pyramid temple. Aside from that, the story pretty much remains the same throughout the rest of the game. The Sega Genesis release is an entirely different experience from the Super Nintendo release and was developed by Virgin Games USA, which would later become Virgin Interactive. Did I say that this game was entirely different? Well, it is. For one, Aladdin has a sword. Yes, a sword. He is taking no prisoners whatsoever, and the apples actually kill enemies and make them explode. However, jumping on enemies in this game, yeah, does jack shit. One thing I do want to point out is the graphical difference with the Sega Genesis version. The sprite animations are extremely smooth, and when you factor in that this was on the Sega Genesis in '93, it's nothing short of impressive. Also note that Virgin Games had Disney animators on hand to help with the animations and character design. The levels are not nearly as straightforward as the SNES release, and the density of enemies is much heavier and more challenging, and so is the platforming. In the Genesis version, you cannot climb ledges, so to clear a new platform, your jump must clear the bottom of the platform you wish to jump to, whereas in the SNES version, you are able to grab ledges, which makes it very easy to breeze through levels. The story of the Genesis version also has its own departures from the film, and in fact, it's a bit more dramatic of a departure because Jafar, as the old man in the prison, basically tells Aladdin to find the golden scarab and tells him that half is being held by Gazim. Yeah, the thief that was eaten by the Cave of Wonders at the beginning of the film. But that's okay, this is a parallel universe. The other departure, like the SNES version, brings Aladdin inside the lamp. Although I do enjoy the animation of the Genesis version better, the SNES Genie level was much better and enjoyable in my humble opinion. There are also bonus levels where you can play as Abu, as well as a little slot machine bonuses at the end of the level, and the storyteller can also be found in levels where you can exchange jewels for stuff. The music also includes more original songs from the film versus the SNES release. Both the Genesis version and the SNES version were major hits and are both considered classics. However, depending on what you are looking for in a game, you may prefer one over the other. If you are looking for a nostalgic, easygoing experience that is easy on the challenging while eating your favorite ice cream, then I would suggest the SNES version. However, if you want a more challenging experience, want to enjoy the great animation, hate your controller, or maybe you just want to see Aladdin with a sword instead of jumping on people, then the Sega Genesis version is for you. Both games are solid for what they offer, and both offer a solid nostalgia experience. I'm Mobius Trip Gaming, and this is Retro Revisited. Until next time.